The way that we consume media, communicate with one another, and conduct business have all been radically altered by the creation of the internet. With such a heavy reliance on it in almost every aspect of our lives, it also opens us up to new vulnerabilities. People's privacy is more at stake than ever, and governments are adapting their laws as quickly as possible. But the wheels of bureaucracy, in many cases, are outpaced by the rapid expansions of computing and information technology. Cybercrime is an ever-growing threat to national security and intellectual property as well. From the prevalence of piracy to the increase of ransomware attacks, the realm of cybercrime seems to outpace the speed of defensive tactics and appropriate penal responses. Less than a year ago, Baltimore's government was held hostage by hackers and was held at a standstill, which proved just how important the role of information systems is today. As a matter of fact, information and the possession of it are at the center of the war on cybercrime. Copyright infringement, piracy, and hacking are all strikes against the possessors of information, and it is worth delving into the responses of different governments and the effects that their policies have had. The United States' record with regards to hacking and piracy have been notably swift and heavy. Some of the most well-known hackers from the United States have sought asylum from different countries in order to avoid extradition to the US and other countries. One of these well-known cases is that of the US versus Julian Assange. Assange's skills as a hacker were born and nurtured while he was in his teens. He went on to hack Lockheed Martin, the Pentagon, NASA, and many others. What he is most famous for, or infamous, is the creation of his site, WikiLeaks, which has had a large impact on US politics in the last several years. WikiLeaks is a platform for anonymous sources to publish classified documents. After becoming host to a myriad of documentation from Afghanistan, the US charged Assange under the Espionage Act of 1917. The Espionage Act was created during World War I as a set of guidelines for defining and punishing those who interfered with the US's military interests or leaked classified US military content. Assange, whom is now being held prisoner at Belmarsh Prison in England. Though the US has pressed hard for the persecution of Julian Assange, they have also encouraged white hat hackers to join their ranks under the understanding that they act within ethically acceptable parameters as defined by the government and Homeland Security. These ethical parameters mostly involve the protection of intellectual property and the safeguarding of US intelligence, but they can also excuse morally questionable practices done to foreign and even domestic entities and individuals. Edward Snowden, another controversial figure, has proven the US guidelines for ethical behavior to be less than lofty. Snowden was the United States' most consequential whistleblower in recent history. As a former CIA and NSA operative, he had released a slew of documentation pertaining to domestic and foreign surveillance. Shortly after doing this, he fled the United States to Hong Kong. His actions created an international backlash against the privacy intrusions of the United States, and they inflamed a debate on the role of privacy in the context of the digital age. Though Snowden's decision was under the umbrella of morally acceptable behavior, he's being charged under the same Espionage Act as Julian Assange. He was granted asylum in Russia, and he does not plan on returning to the United States unless guaranteed a fair trial. At face value, Russ's acceptance of Snowden's asylum request seems like a decision rooted in moral authority, but given their own track record with regards to privacy and hacking, it is much more likely that they saw it as a politically advantageous move. A piracy law passed in 2013 is a perfect demonstration of Russia's duplicity in these matters. It outlined the state's right to block access to websites that violated the copyright laws following a 3-day period after takedown requests. Though it sounds like a reasonable law, its implementation proved its true intent. Many sites and IP addresses have been blacklisted since then, even while following government-mandated copyright guidelines. When the law was originally passed, the populace's backlash led to the creation of a new movement called the Pirate Party, whose primary aim was to overturn this law. Russia claims that they have only blacklisted sites that have drug-related content, torrents for crackware, music and movies, and suicide-encouraging material. But the public largely disagrees. The law has been used to attack and deplatform LGBTQ groups, anti-Putin individuals, organizations perceived to be against the Russian establishment, and any site that can be accessed through tunneled web traffic, or VPNs. In addition to this law, Russia also has immense surveillance capabilities, which they regularly use on their own citizens. They maintain that it is their right, despite not having warrants in most, if not all, cases. Figures put forth by Russia's Supreme Court show that Russia's intercepted messages and telephone conversations nearly doubled from 265,937 to 539,864 in 2012. While these are impressive numbers, they still do not account for the conversations, for the unknown amount of counterintelligence interceptions of domestic and foreign messages and phone calls. Russia's punitive and deterrent measures for piracy are much harsher than the US's, and while it may seem that it would discourage pirates, it also has the implied downside of being monitored by of citizens being monitored by the government 24/7. So, Snowden, who detested the US's policies on this matter, was granted asylum in a country whose practices are even more invasive. Piracy may be punished more heavily in Russia, but hacking is a different story. Many stories have gained worldwide attention that related to Russian hackers because the state has surprisingly loose guidelines with how to deal with hackers. Russia's neglect of prosecuting hackers, along with its unwillingness to extradite people, mostly hinges on hackers only directing attacks toward other areas of the world. Roman Selenezev, a hacker who ran an identity theft ring, was wanted by the US and other countries for his crimes. Russia refused to comply with Interpol and US forces, though, and he was only arrested after leaving the country. Cybercrime experts in Russia are open about the fact that Russia protects hackers. One such expert, Misha Glenny, said, "Russian law enforcement and the FSB in particular have a very good idea of what is going on, and they are monitoring it. But as long as the fraud is restricted to other parts of the world, they don't care." Further proof of this sentiment is demonstrated in the procedures of Russian malware. Many Russian and Eastern European malware developers write the code for malware to avoid infecting devices located within the borders of Russia. This is done purposely to avoid infecting native residents. As long as Russian hackers focus their efforts outside of the motherland's borders and comply with Russian intelligence requests, they are able to act with impunity. The invasive nature of surveillance is felt worldwide. It is a difficult predicament, though. Theft via hacking is a major threat across the globe as well, and it has the ability to wreak havoc among financial institutions, power grids, and individuals. It may seem unnerving, but for every talented hacker, there is an equal or superior cyber defense expert who can nullify threats posed by cybercriminals. The question of whether piracy is harmful has yet to be definitively answered. Minor piracy is such a common occurrence that most people under a certain age have illegally streamed or torrented content. Anti-piracy ads from the 1990s seem a bit silly in light of who modern pirates are, because the prevalence of it means that most of your friends and classmates could be considered pirates. One ad, which seems so outdated now, is almost laughable. In it, the narrator asks, "You wouldn't steal a car, would you?" This is obviously a false equivalence. We think of trading files and torrents as a form of sharing. It's as if a buddy let you have an old movie or book. This, while risking oversimplification, is the reason that many countries have made torrenting and peer-to-peer file sharing legal. For example, Spain is among the safest countries for torrenting because they view the act of sharing files for free with one another as a form of free communication. So as long as the party is not making a profit off of the files, the act of sharing them is perfectly legal. In Mexico, torrenting is very widespread and carries little risk. The few laws that do exist are so obsolete that unless a person is making a business out of illegal file sharing, they will be untouched by the judicial system. There have been attempts at modernizing Mexico's stance on file sharing and torrenting, but nothing substantial has been accomplished. Switzerland is the safest country to torrent in. Unlike Mexico, where the guidelines for punishing piracy are loose and inchoate, in Switzerland, they're very concretely in favor of peer-to-peer file sharing, and their laws protect those who do it. The law in Switzerland states allows for the downloading of anything as long as it is for personal use and not for profit. This means that if one does not intend to sell someone else's work, then whatever software or media that one has downloaded can be enjoyed freely without limitations. Switzerland also has several privacy laws that protect the people who download via torrents, making it unavailable and illegal for the third party to spy on IP addresses of people who download. This means that no one really can be sued except in extreme cases. As said by Eric Kane, writer for Forbes magazine, I don't think anyone wants to see creative people and producers of content get hurt by piracy. The question isn't really whether or not piracy is right or wrong. However, so much is whether it does in fact harm the people and companies in question. And while I'm pretty sure the entertainment industry's reluctance to adapt to new technology has hurt them, the artists themselves have amazing new opportunities to create really incredible art in a really autonomous way. For the future of piracy and hacking, it's clear won't stop anytime soon. Companies, artists, and individuals will, however, adapt with more ease to the planet, becoming more innovative in our next generation to find ways to minimize it by normalizing the employment of hackers and inventing new streaming systems that work with the world, not against it, like we have already seen with Netflix, Spotify, and Hulu. The world, or at least the bytes that make it up, are at our fingertips, and now it's up to us to use it to make the world a better place.